Welcome to episode 392 of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet65. You can get in the game, of course, Stanley Cup Final, Game 4 tonight. All sorts of lines. Can the Oilers score a 5-on-5 goal? That and more. Check it out at Bet365. Jason Gregor, Frank Seravalli. We will get to the Stanley Cup Final after buy or sell with your Remchuk, but we're going to start trade targets. There's also, as we near the offseason, and potential offer sheets. So we'll get to all of that. Frank Seravalli joins us. Frank, how you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing? Busy week. Got one trade close to being executed, and Chris Kreider going to the Anaheim Ducks, and lots of other stuff percolating.
What do you hear is the return on that trade?
It's very specific. It's Carey Terrance, who played for Team USA at the World Juniors, second-round pick in 2023. He's a two-way center who's probably a bottom-of-the-lineup NHL center if he makes it. He'd be going back from Anaheim to New York. He's a Western New York native. And also a pick swap involved, but the key for the Rangers is that the Anaheim Ducks, using or leveraging their tons of cap space that they have, would be taking on the entirety of Chris Kreider's deal for each of these last two seasons.
Well, this is not maybe a huge surprise considering it's been 8 months since Chris Kreider's name was on the board by his GM.
Well, I think it's probably a message sent to anyone else in the New York Rangers orbit. They're going to find a way to move you at some point. And Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba, oddly enough, in the same memo, end up on the same team and will be teammates again. Also reunited with Frank Vetrano and Ryan Strome. So no real hiccup or under expectation that there will be an issue with regards to the no trade clause that just needs to be fully signed off on, and that paperwork sent in as part of making this deal happen. But also an interest from Chris Kreider to play for Joel Quenneville, which I think is really interesting to see the beginning potential return for the Ducks, in that they've got a destination coach that people want to play for. So that's another interesting factor. But yeah, if you're, I guess, the message would be, if you're Mika Zibanejad and you've got your full nose and you're standing on that ground, which of course is a clause that you've earned, whether it's been Barkley, Goodrow on waivers, or Trouba, or now Kreider, they'll find a way to get you at some point.
Yeah, no movement clause doesn't mean you can't get traded. It just means you're going to have a say in where you get traded at the end of it. That's really all it does.
A full no trade guarantees that you're not going to get traded unless you sign off on it. And
but that's what I mean. So you have a say in where you're going to go.
You can say no to anything.
Yeah, sure.
Everything.
But that's what a say is.
Well, no, you're saying you have a say in where you get traded. He's saying I don't have to get traded at all, which is the truth.
Yeah, well, it's true. He doesn't have to get traded. Usually, if you can make it so it's uncomfortable enough. And like I have argued, I think there should be a limit on how many no trade clauses that are handed out in the NHL.
Why are you always trying to save GMs from themselves? Term limits? And you want a limit on no trades?
Term limits doesn't save. Term limits actually helps the players. The overall association, it helps them. I've crunched all the numbers out. There's no dead. You'll have much less dead cap space for guys who are currently in the game. That's how it helps. And it actually ends up getting the top guys actually make more money.
But what about the other guys that otherwise wouldn't play those other 3 years? Let's say you limit it to 5 years. Okay. What if years 6, 7, and 8, they'd be out of the league, but they're under contract? How many tens of millions of dollars is that every year?
They're not going to be out of the league, Frank. Not at all. They'll still be in the league. They'll just be paid accordingly to what they're contributing on the end.
No, I'm saying the guys let's say you're 30 and you sign an 8-year deal and you hit 35 and you're toast. You can't do it anymore. Those extra 3 years on your deal have earned you serious. You wouldn't be playing. You'd be out of the league.
Yeah. So Do we want a league?
Is my point. It's a security instrument.
Yeah, but if you're not good enough to be in the league, you shouldn't be in the league.
But you're saving GMs from themselves. And that's what you'd be doing by limiting the idea of, hey, you can only hand out 2 no trade clauses.
But I also looked at, we're talking such a small percentage of the league. That's why. There's first of all, like, the elite guys aren't going to fall by the wayside anyway. Like, look at Brad Marchand. Brad Marchand signed an 8-year deal at 29, right? It just wrapped up at 37. Look what's going to happen for Brad Marchand this upcoming summer as a free agent, right? Like, you have lots of options. To me, it's not if you GMs make good moves, like, trust me, there'll be some 5-year deals, Frank, that'll still be terrible. Don't get me wrong. It'll just be less terrible for the overall health and product of your league. Doesn't like it just, I don't believe it hurts. If you're not good enough to play, you shouldn't be playing, and not be like, well, you know what? Hey, this guy thought I was good enough, so good for me. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's a great thing. And it's a small percentage of players fall into that category who would be better suited to get 5-year deals than 7, 8-year deals, even 6. And I think teams are wising up to it. I'm going to be fascinated to see, and maybe it's because they wised up because they didn't have any caps the last few years, because the cap has been flat for a long time, and now it's going to go up, that we'll see here how many GMs are like, you know what? I'd rather give a guy a little bit more money and less term, because term is ultimately what kills most of these contracts. If a guy is overpaid for a year or 2, you live with it. If he's overpaid for 5 or 6 years, that's a problem.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the cap, because I think that's potentially a severely limiting factor. So just on transactions this summer, teams have cap space that they otherwise haven't had for the last 5 years. There was a small bump last year, but a real meaningful increase this year, and then 2 more on the back end of this, that teams know exactly where this is heading. There are no secrets. And with that, there's less of a need or an urgency to move out players than we've seen in the past. And I think that part is, it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of impact it has now. Because in talking to a bunch of managers, that's the statement that I've gotten in reply is, it's a very quiet trade market because no one needs to do anything. Everyone wants to improve. Very few teams are shipping out deals or in a hurry to ship out because they don't have the same pressure to do it.
Okay, so that ties us into the offer sheet potential, right? We saw it last year and everybody's like, hey, we're getting closer. Are we going to see significant offer sheets here? And I know one name that's come out by a lot of people, of course, is Matthew Knies, really good player, the Maple Leafs, although he's probably due to get around $7.5 million over 7 years. If you look at what he's done in his career and everything, an offer sheet would have to be massive. And we probably should quickly, update people on what compensation is. Anything from 1.5 to 2.34 is a third rounder. 2.3 to 4.68 is a second rounder. 4.68 to just over 7 mil is a first and a second. Then you got to go from 7 mil just above to 9.36 per second and a third. Then 9.36 to 11.7 mil gets you 2 firsts, a second, and a third. And if you want to go all in, you have to have an offer sheet over $11.7, and then the compensation's 4 first rounders. I don't think we'll get that high, but I know you wrote an article, Frank. The one there that to me makes the most sense, because I think it's similar to Dylan Holloway, is Maverick Bourque in Dallas. Young player, 20, probably feel like, didn't get a lot of chance, didn't play much in the playoffs. The Stars don't have a lot of cap space, that even if you offer him, similar to Holloway, right? 2.3, 2.5 on a 2-year deal, Dallas is in a tough spot. They can't match. However, St. Louis did it by having 2 at once, and I think that made it harder.
I don't think it made it harder. I don't think it made any difference, actually, because they're mutually exclusive. They could have just kept one.
Yeah, I still think they should have matched Holloway, but Edmonton, that is.
See, it's funny. I think they should have done the opposite, where they should have kept Broberg. They wouldn't have to go out and be as active as they were on the trade market. That said, I think we should talk about Knies for a minute, because I think you're right in that. First off, the most likely thing is that Knies doesn't make it to restricted free agency. That he signs a contract extension with the Leafs long before. And the other reminder for all hockey fans is that when it comes to free agency, or restricted free agency and offer sheets, is that you need to have a player that's willing to sign the deal. It's one thing for speculation. It's another thing for teams to reach out. If you make it to June 30th and begin to have those conversations with your agent, it's a whole other thing for you to put pen to paper and say, I am making the conscious choice and decision to leave my team. And so that is always a wild card, because you might have a player who's extremely loyal. And to that effect, Matthew Knies said all the right things when it came to locker cleanout day for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But what's the last thing that the Toronto Maple Leafs can really afford to have at this current juncture as they remake and revisit their team? It's another player in the 11.7, 11.5, $11 million range that you have on your cap. And so I think the projections are slightly off on Matthew Knies. I do think the 7.25 or 7.5 AAV is correct, but I don't think it's that number if you start to buy more UFA years, because this is a guy who's already at 30 goals, plays a totally physical brand of hockey with speed, size, toughness. He's a human nail gun, 182 hits last season. So he's a special player. And that said, Wyatt Johnson kind of set the table for you with 8.4 for 5 years. And with that said, you'd have to really present something significant. And it would have to be something in that 11-7 range, under the 4 first-round pick compensation, to get the Leafs to really think long and hard about saying no. Because I think right now, just park Marner, assume that he's gone. Don't even think about John Tavares until you can figure out what's happening with Matthew Knies. That's your number one priority this summer.
I would agree it is your number one priority. And see, the thing about a big offer sheet like that is the odds of you being the new team getting good value Matthew Knies is pretty difficult. Like 11.7, like that's more than David Pastrnak, for goodness sakes. And that's why I like the lower level offer sheets. Like you looked at Holloway blew the doors off, right? 60 points at 2.3. You're like, now this is unreal for us. Even Broberg at 4.6, the amount of minutes he played, solid, right? His 5-on-5 goals against ratio is outstanding. So you're getting good value. If you pay Matthew Knies 11.7, not only all the picks, it's going to be extremely difficult for him to live up to that contract.
I don't think so.
You think he's going to be that good?
Yes. And I think a slight bump next season gets him close to 40 goals, and he rounds into a more complete player. You're talking about an 80-point player potentially who is physical, that I don't think is a pipe dream. And with the cap going up so significantly, you've got what is, one, you have to keep the AAV in somewhat realistic terms, but two, the whole point of this is to acquire the player. You've got to go out and get him in your boat. So you've got to appease him with life-changing money, and you've got to make the Toronto Leafs or any team want to say no. So you, in theory, by nature, you have to essentially overpay or place a wager. But that's a guy that I'm placing the wager on. I'm betting on Matthew Knies.
Yeah, if he's 11.7,
No, but he's not 11-7 in real terms. Like, you're missing the point. I'm not saying his actual AAV should be 11-7. I'm saying in order to make this happen, can he eventually, over the course of that year period of time, get close to playing at that level? Yes, I think he can, with the rising cap.
Yeah.
5 years from now, the cap's going to be $130 million.
Sure. If you put him at 11.7 up until free agency begins, that would make him the 5th highest paid player in the NHL.
But you're betting on the future, and you're doing it to acquire the player.
Yeah, I like the player. I just don't like the player that much. I just think that
But what if you have tens of millions of dollars of cap space? What if you're pick a team that's got tons of it? If you're the Ducks, who are leveraging their cap space quite well with, as we just Kreider. What if you're the Flyers, who have $26 million today? What if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, who have $31 million? At the very least, you're potentially also, if you're in the same division or the same conference, you're sticking it to the Leafs at the same time.
No, I understand that. I'll say that. Now, Carolina, maybe, because they got a lot of their guys under contract. But if you're the Ducks or you're,
Chicago, $31 million, you're dying for another really good player. What do you care if it's 11-7 or 9-5 or what? The difference is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean shit to you.
Well, see, I disagree. Why the Maple Leafs get in trouble? Because they overpaid John, and then their next guys had to get overpaid.
That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't.
Why not? Because now all the Ducks and the Blackhawks young guys are going to look and say, "Look what Matthew Knies gets."
No. That's not how it works. Nope. You can't say, "Hey, what offer sheet guy got? That's what I should get." It's a method to acquire the player.
I know, but that's what. John Tavares was a UFA. Matthews and Marner weren't UFAs. They still got huge money.
But that's different, though. They got huge money because they earned huge money. No one just handed them huge money. They earned it with their play.
Okay, but Knies didn't earn 11-7. Like, I wouldn't do Matthew Knies at 11-7. Maverick Bourque. I like Matthew Knies. To me, I think you do Matthew Knies, and even though the cap goes up, you're so skewing your internal cap.
There is no internal cap. You have $40-some million in cap space. 2 seasons from now, Bucks need to spend $65 million in 1 year just to get to the minimum. Who cares if it's 11-7 or 9-5 or 7-5? It makes no difference to you. The point is, do you have a good player to put in your lineup or not? That's
all right.
And if you don't have good players to put in your lineup, who cares about what your internal cap is? Because you're not going to have to pay anyone jack shit.
Yeah, I guess. But the other thing is, now you're giving up all these prospects in a team that still, I don't think the cupboards are that deep in Chicago. So
in picks?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't trade 2 firsts, a second, and a third for Matt Knies?
Well, not at 11-7. Yes, I would at like a reasonable number, but I wouldn't at 11-7.
But if it's a reasonable number, you don't, because the team just matches. Your theory doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I know, but neither does yours, because you're grossly overpaying for him.
Of course it does, because the cap space, it's a number that's out of the clear blue sky. It's not rooted in reality or anything else. You must spend at least a certain minimum of dollars.
Well, I understand.
If you're going to spend it on Bertuzzi and Brody and pick all the schlubs that the Blackhawks have had in their lineup, fill as warm bodies. What's the difference? I want good players, and I don't care how I need to get them.
Okay, but you could do that for the short term, but I don't think it leads to long-term success. That's all. It would be putting lipstick pig. It's getting you a good player, but at a lot of cost. That every contract moving forward now, Connor Bedard's going to be like, well, I got to get paid more. I'm Connor Bedard.
No. That's not how it works. So, but let me ask you this, though. Okay. So we agree in theory that Knies is 7-5, right?
Yes.
Okay. And let's say it takes 11-7 to get him. That gap, $4.2 million between reality and acquisition, if that's what it ends up being, in $130 million cap, if you're throwing your cap out of whack that much with one guy and it's just one guy, isn't it negligible? I'm trying to find another way to say it.
Yeah, I just think that the consequence, like to me, there's always consequences to your actions. In the near time where you have all the cap space, I can understand saying we don't care about it. Those second and third round picks, we can do all the odd numbers on what are the odds that pick's going to work. But let's say, what if Chicago gets Matthew Knies? Does that suddenly mean they're not a top 10 in the draft next year? Right? Like you can get some pretty good players there, and you still need more than good players. So now you've got Matthew Knies, and you can go out and I guess overspend somewhere else. But how much better does Matthew Knies make you? Does he make a team?
No, but I think if you stack up Knies and a few other good players, he really does.
Yeah, well, but how are you're gonna give up all these other players? What are you gonna give up? Like all your draft picks, right? Because that's the other thing. Now you've just got a lot of assets. So how do you acquire these other players, even though you have cap space? Now some teams will want to just give you guys, but usually they give you guys who aren't very good.
Well, I think you just brought up a really good point that I wish I had earlier, which is really bad teams are highly disincentivized from making offer sheets. Let's consider the Hawks as one of those teams. They're likely to be a bad team again next year. There's a real chance that pick that they'd be giving up, if it is a first, ends up being Gavin McKenna. And if you're the Leafs, you go, man, let's just, again, we're playing this out as a hypothetical. If you're the Leafs, you go, oh, we really don't want to lose Matt Knies. And this 11-7 would throw our cap out of whack. But we would potentially get a lottery shot here. And potentially, if the Hawks stink again in 27, we might get 2. But I think that's even more so if you want to take this and flip it around the other way. I think that's even more so why bad team or really good teams, should be incentivized to make ridiculous offer sheets if you can swing it on your cap, because your pick is not nearly as valuable in the mid to late 20s, assuming that your team's still going to be good and you're not just going to have some one-off year that goes else.
True. Although the thing is, when you look at the teams who ultimately win, how many of them have really egregious cap where you look and say, God, this guy's like $4 million, $3 million overpaid, right? Like most of them don't really have players. So you might have a guy who's $1 million, $1.5 million. Maybe you could stretch it to 2, but you don't have many that are that outrageous that allows you to win, right? Unless they're on LTIR. So that's always the challenge, I think, because as you get closer, all those teams are so competitive. A lot of times the difference is you've got a few guys that are just giving you unbelievable value. Like look at Florida this year. Sam Bennett, he's on the last year of his deal making $4.4 million. He's leading the NHL in playoff goals, for God's sakes. The only 3 guys in the salary cap era have scored more goals than Sam Bennett. Ovi and Crosby each had 15 once, and Hyman had 16 once. That's unreal. Like the bang for your is massive. And so usually to win, you need more bang for your buck than guys who are like, oh, this guy's really, giving us nothing for his big value.
Yeah, particularly usually those teams all have at least 1 or 2 solid contributors on entry deals too.
Yeah, sometimes not really like Florida doesn't have one, right? Hasn't had one. I'm trying to think, did Tampa ever have anybody?
They had a bunch. Tampa had Ross Colton and for a while Yanni Gourde, and they did. They all had like super cheap. Florida had Verhage on a super cheap deal before.
Yeah, but it wasn't a ZLC, right? Was it?
No, but Verhage's last deal to this one was 4.1, and he was scoring 73 points a season.
Yeah. You get good value deals.
But they had for a stretch where they were super competitive, they had Luosterainen on his entry level. They had Anton Lundell is only in the second season of his deal, but beyond entry level. So when they won the President's Trophy and got to the Cup Final the first time, he was on an entry level deal. Yeah, every team has a few for sure.
Yeah, it's more you have like your experienced guys that you get, Hyman made $5 million when he scored 16 goals, right? And that's really what you need.
Let me just wrap this entire RFA offer discussion with the obvious, which is I still think it's very likely that Matthew Knies is re-signed by the Leafs well before making it to July 1st, and an offer sheet is a possibility. But unlike previous years, I think dealing with now is coming off the scouting combine is teams whispering to agents at the combine, hey, if things don't work out the way you exactly want them to with your team, just sit patient. You've got no reason to jump, because we'll come in and save the day with an offer sheet. And at the very least, agents are highly incentivized to look at these offer sheets as well, because it either guarantees their player a deal.
Yeah. No, I like them on your list. I think Maverick Bork makes a lot of sense. And I actually like the Joel Holfer one too. It'd be interesting because it's going against the Blues. Yeah. But I also think I like he's right in that wheelhouse to be a guy who can take a step. And, $4.6 million to be a guy who might be your 1A and starts 50 games for you, that could be worth it. So those are the two.
Will Cooley. I think Will Cooley is Matt Knies light. Like, I don't know that he'll get to the same statistical numbers, but physical, big, versatile, another slight bump, and he's at 30 goals. Like, I think there's some potential real value there. That the way that I structured that, hypothetical offer sheet, it was something like 5 times 7.02. He's already at 20 some goals. How much more does he really need to shoot to make 7 worth it? 30 goals gets you well north of 7. It gets you into the mid 8s now.
No.
Brock Besser is going to get in the mid 8s, and his career average is like 28, 29 goals.
Yeah. Now, trade targets before we get to buy or sell. You got like JJ Peterka. No, you've had him on your list for a while, Frank. He has it at the top. You had Kreider second. He's already going to get moved. Bowen Byram. Marcia, so is an interesting one. He's only been in for a year. I think Rasmus Anderson in Calgary is one that makes a ton of sense. What do you Keandre Miller, is it just the Rangers are looking to trade everything? Because, man, the Rangers defense, like Adam Fox did not have a good year last year. Right. It kind of didn't get talked about that much. And like what Keandre Miller, what they just don't want to pay him. Like, why would they want to trade him?
First off, I don't think anyone on the Rangers defense had a good year last year. That said, look, I think the biggest issue plaguing the Rangers over the last 3-4 years has been their inability to defend. And when you've got the I got a funny text message. I couldn't help myself. When you've got a bunch of players on your team and Fox plays the style that he plays, right? You need to round him and the rest of your core with guys who defend super well. And Miller doesn't do that. He is such an effortless skater, and he has the size that someone is going to be interested. But with his minutes played and with the points that he puts up at this stage of his career, you're going to need to make a significant and serious investment in him. And I think to answer your question, I don't think the Rangers are over the moon to do that. It's not that they have to move him, but they could punt it down the road a little bit and go use their leverage, go the bridge route, go arbitration, whatever it is. But their best case, if he's not a long-term fit, is probably to cash in on the value that he has right now and see if you can reimagine your defense core as a whole.
One of the interesting names on your list, Isaac Howard, of course, a first-round pick of the Lightning in 2022. If he doesn't sign a contract, then he's a free agent by August 15th. And it sounds like
August 15th, 2026.
26. Yeah. Sorry, 2026. So they could wait if they wanted to. It means he's got to stay in school another year. Do you get the sense that he wants to leave and turn pro?
I get the sense that this relationship is over, that Isaac Howard and the Lightning are not going to see eye to eye, and that the longer the Lightning wait, they lose leverage in a significant way, because stretching into if he's playing college hockey again, he gets to wait and decide where he goes and doesn't need the Lightning to unilaterally trade him anywhere. So it's in their best interest to move him this summer.
Why is this relationship soured? Like, if I'm a young player, I'm an offensive-minded player. I look at that Lightning roster and be like, oh my God, I get to come in. I'm going to play a Kucherov. I'm going to play a Braden Point. Like, how many teams can offer that?
I don't know the exact mix. I think there's been a lot rumored, and I don't want to pile onto it. But needless to say, I think Howard and his camp felt like they were not properly respected by the Lightning. And I don't know. And again, I don't know what the details are beyond that, but that's the baseline of it, which is a major screw up for Tampa because you have nothing in your prospect pipeline. This guy's the reigning Hobey Baker Award winner. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a predictor that he's going to be a stud or star in the NHL, but he's also shown to have some really clutch qualities to his game that if I'm the Lightning and it's hard to find future pieces, especially for a team that gives away draft picks like they do, their day of reckoning is coming in pretty short order. Might not be next year or the year after, but it's happening. And you want guys like Howard to try and bridge you to the next group of players, the next generation of players on your team, and not having him in the mix is going to hurt.
Yeah, you look at the last 20 Hobey Baker winners in the salary cap era. Obviously, Jack Eichel, Johnny Gaudreau, Cale Makar, Cole Caulfield, Adam Fantilli's being a pretty good player. Celebrini looks like he's a really good player. So, that's like 6 out of 20. And some of the other ones, not so much. So, and some people might not like what I'm going to say here, but I get a little tired when I hear, they didn't respect me, for people that have accomplished nothing at the pro level yet. Sometimes I think there's a little bit, and I'm not saying this is Howard's case, I'm just saying overall. It's like when I hear players, it's hard to play in a Canadian market. Suck it up, Buttercup. I'll tell you what's hard, and that ain't hard. So the respect sometimes, now you can have an organization that maybe doesn't communicate with you as well as you would like, and that's an organization's fault at times, but you're probably not the only one in the organization. But I do get a sense sometimes, and we've heard it, we can go through the examples of player, they didn't respect me or my client, yada, yada. And the person never becomes anything at the NHL because I think they believe their self-worth is a lot higher than it actually is. So I'm not saying Howard's that guy. I've heard this too often. It kind of irks me. So just a random rant.
I'll say this. Sometimes there's definitely an air of arrogance that comes from the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. That's just fact. So not everyone's for everyone is the point.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's true. So, but he's the intriguing one. He's a young prospect. I'm sure teams would have lots of interest in him.
Yeah, but they're not going to get equal value for him.
No, you mean Tampa Bay? No, I agree. Like
that's the really hard part is like 31st overall pick to think just because he went and turned around and had a Hobey Baker Award season and was a really good player for Team USA that they're going to be like, oh yeah, hey, let me give you a top 15 pick for him. You're not going to get a first, I don't think.
No.
I think you're probably looking at a second.
Yeah, well, you look at what Philly got for Cutter Gauthier. Now a little bit different, maybe in a sense, but still got a really high player.
Cutter Gauthier was a top 10 pick, was he not?
No, but where pick to me is it's more so like this guy got picked 3 years ago, right? 2022, right? It was 2022 draft.
Yeah.
So, it's where to me, like I don't care if you're a top 10 pick and 3 years later you're not very good. It's
that's
what have you done?
Teams look at it. I don't think.
Maybe.
Particularly with Gauthier.
Yeah, like I would look at.
I would make the argument that the Flyers did not get a very good return. Cutter Gauthier was a 5 overall pick.
Yeah,
and I think he's got future 40 goal scorer written all over him.
Yeah, but they did get a 6th overall pick in return.
A 6th overall pick who was older and we had already known had some issues and deficiencies.
Yeah, so I'll be curious what they get. Now, one name you don't have on your list, Frank, that I would watch for in this offseason is Victor Arvidsson.
Yeah, I mean, he's on my list. I just didn't publish it because he's in the middle of the Stanley Cup Final, and there's probably guys on both rosters that I'd have on there. I don't think it's necessarily fair to them or the teams. And to be fair, the Oilers and Panthers aren't engaging in those talks at this moment in time anyway. So Victorson will most certainly be on an iteration moving forward of a list.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a mutual one. I think he's going to want to go somewhere he gets a little bit more opportunity in the final year of his deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially if the Oilers can pull it off and win, it just makes it that much easier to walk away.
Let's get to Ty for buy or sell. Ty, how you doing?
I'm good, boys. Ready to roll. New edition of Buy or Sell brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the code NATION, an official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Let's go closer to the top of Frank Seravalli's trade targets board. The headliners, two big new names joined, Robertson and Necas. If you had to buy on one of them getting dealt, which one do you buy on, Frank? Who has the higher likelihood of being moved?
It's a really good question.
Thank you.
I just think the Avs are in such an uncool position. They're right back where they were 1 year ago with Mikko Rantanen, a guy who needs a new deal, who's going to be expensive, that you're probably not really sure that you want to give it to him. And if he goes out and has another north of point per game, you're going to have to give it to him. So, I mean, it certainly makes you wonder if they were to rewind with all the other moves that they made. Is the Rantanen one the one that they shouldn't have? Revisionist history, of course, that league sources have speculated for a couple weeks now that if you were to put a $9 million AAV in front of Necas right now, that he's not signing it. That 9 would wait for another guy who has another 85-point season. It would be. Statistically, it would be. Like, I know I just saw your eyebrow wrinkle, Jay, but it's truth. It's fact. So he believes this guy has a very big self-belief, very confident in his game and what his worth is. If all of those things, and a big if, this is league speculation. If those things are true, if you're the Avs, don't you have to trade him? Don't you have to go, look, like I can't afford to find out the hard way, and I don't really want to pay him. I'm not jamming up my cap with $9.5 or $10 million in Marty Necas. I'm moving on.
That'd be crazy. Greg's buy or sell, Robertson or Necas?
Well, I guess if I have to buy, I would buy Robertson only because I think there's going to if I'm going to be acquiring one of them, I'm acquiring Robertson all day long, right? You know, Necas has had a 28, 27 goal season. It's good. I know he had the year last year. My issue with Necas is in the playoffs. And Necas in the playoffs has 35 points in 66 games. And, you know, you look at even in the last 3 years, so if you want to say he's a little bit older of a player, he has 21 points in 33 games. Okay numbers, but not $9 million plus numbers for me. So I would go with Robertson.
Next one I got for you, closer to the bottom of Frank's list, but an interesting situation nonetheless. Buy or sell on Leafs actually trading Mitch Marner's UFA rights, Greg's?
Well, if you get down to it here in the final week, right, and June 26th, and you're like, guess what? Marner's not signing here. A team wants to give me a third or whatever the number is. I would do it. Like, why not? If I'm not going to get him, then I would do it. Because by that, you're the only team that's been able to negotiate with him. You should know by June 26th or 7th if you're going to sign Mitch Marner. And if not, I know it's only a third, but a third still is a chance. Maybe a third, something as part of a package later on. I'd much rather get a third than nothing because it's better than nothing. So I'm gonna buy that, yes, because I think there'll be some teams who want to get Marner and would be willing to take a risk to say, I'll give up a third, and if I sign him, maybe it changes to a second or whatever the number is. Just so I get, a 48-hour, 72-hour window to negotiate exclusively. Some teams might think it's worth it because there's going to be a lot of teams after him. And I think a lot of teams will be trying to be aggressive.
Okay, so I'll buy, but it's a more nuanced view than yours, Jay. No team is giving up anything unless they have a deal or a deal that's ready to be worked out and they can add what's in it for them. Yeah, it's the window to jump the market for sure, but it's to get the 8th year as well to potentially suppress the AAV. That's what really is the value for that team.
But can they get the 8th year anyway? I thought you had to be on the.
No, you have to sign and trade, so that they'd have. That's what's
Toronto would have to sign them. Okay.
And I think it would be a 2nd round pick anyway. Would be the cost to do that business. The Leafs aren't in the business of helping out Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner isn't in the business of helping out the Leafs, and the Leafs certainly aren't in the business of helping out another team. So unless everyone's priorities align together, which I do think a real possibility exists for that to happen, that short of that, I'd be surprised if anyone's willing to give up even a 3rd round pick just to purely jump the market.
Because see, if I'm a team, honestly, the reason I looked at it my way, if I'm the team, I'd rather sign Marner 2 years than 8 years, to be honest. So.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps you get the player, obviously you change calculation or maybe brings the AAV down or whatever. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying too, Greg. Last one, let's go to Bet365's futures tab for this Stanley Cup Final. I'm going to give you guys 2 options here because they're both pretty juicy. This Stanley Cup Final to go over 6.5, so get to a 7th game, is plus 160. This series to end in 5 games is plus 265. If you had to buy on one, I'm not letting you say it's ending in 6. Would you buy on this thing going 7, or would you buy on this thing ending in 5? Frank, which one's more likely?
7. I said before, I think this series is going the and I would bet on. I don't bet, but I would bet on Connor McDavid having a multi-point night. I would even bet on Connor McDavid having a 3-point night in 4.
Greg's buy or sell is this. Would you pick 7 or 5?
Yeah, I would pick 7. The Oilers losing 4 in a row would be awful for them and be a little surprising. Like the first 2 games were really close. Game 3 was just a duster for Edmonton right from the get-go. I don't think they'll be that bad again. So I don't think they're going to lose 2 more in a row. Like if they lose game 4, which is very possible, I think they could probably find a way to win game 5 on home ice.
All right, there you go, boys. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Bet365.
So let's finish on the cup. And you mentioned Connor McDavid. So I have my article coming out later today. I'll tease it at Oilers Nation, Frank. But there's lots of talk. Okay, you know what the Oilers have to do here against Florida. And number one, I think they gotta stop trying to I don't even know how to put it. Let's just say stop trying to have the dick measuring contest. Okay. Every scrum, you don't need to be initiating. You don't need to be getting engaged. You won. Okay. That's not who
I don't want to
is.
be in any dick measuring contest that I'm going to lose. And that's one that the Oilers are going to lose every time.
Well, it's just, it's not working for now. The third, I'm not talking about the third period, but if you even go back to game 2, watch how many times Florida wants this game to go into the alley. They love it. They got guys like Tkachuk and Bennett and Marchand. Those guys love that stuff. Right? They love, and they actually play better. Yes, they're good at it. So stop playing into their game would be the number one thing. And has to play more 5-on-5. But the big key here is Edmonton's got to wake the hell up in Florida, because in Florida, in the Stanley Cup Finals, they have been awful except one game, game 5. They have in the other 4 games a grand total of 3 goals. I went through every playoff game in the salary cap era. There's 1,691 of them. You know how many times you've won a game when you score 1 goal? 3.1% of the time. That's what the Oilers are basically. Hey, we got a 3% chance to win in 4 of the 5 games in Florida.
I'm surprised it's that high, to be honest. You have a 3% chance to win only scoring 1 goal.
Yeah, and because you win what? Because there's some 1 games, right?
That's still a wild stat. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it is in the regular seasons. Actually, and even I would go back and I know in the regular season scoring 2 goals is like even 8.7. Like you got to score to win in the NHL. And the Oilers 5-on-5, Frank, in 5 games in Florida. Guess how many goals they have? 5-on-5.
I don't know.
2 in 5 games.
I'm just looking at it even more recently. I think and I didn't double check it, but forgive me if I'm wrong. This series alone at 5-on-5, when McDavid's been on the ice, the Oilers have outshot the Panthers 42-17.
Okay, I have to look at that.
42-17 is what I read. Okay. And assuming this is accurate, if that's the case, either Florida has to seriously knuckle down, or they're about to get McDavid torched. That's my guess, is that the Oilers have probably been a little bit unlucky with, if that's truly the number.
I'm gonna double check that, because that is that's a good number for Edmonton. So yeah, McDavid on the ice, 44-27. They've been outscored 4-2.
4-27 it was?
Yeah, 44-27.
Okay, so not as good, not as big as 42-17, but still a hugely big margin between two teams. And if you outshoot someone 44-27 and you're outscored 4-2, my guess is that's probably pretty unlucky.
A little bit, but you know what? I was looking at high danger chances, and that's where high danger chances. Edmonton in game 1 definitely had an advantage there. Game 2 was pretty even. Game 3 obviously was in favor of Florida. Now that game, the last 30 minutes of that game, I don't even know if you can analyze it, and it was over, and it just became a face washing fest. So I think, hey, McDavid only has one game of 5 where he has a point in Florida, right? So I'll give Florida guys credit. Barkov, Reinhart, Forsling, they play them in Florida at so you got to find a way. And there's 2 things the Oilers have to do if they want to score, Frank. Number 1, stop shooting on the ice from in close on Bobrovsky. It does not work, right? It doesn't work. So all the scouts will tell you it doesn't work. Above the pad or high glove are the best places to shoot on him. And then second, they've got to get some layered screens. They've only had 2 layered screens the entire series, and they've scored 1 goal. They got 50%. So it's good. But to me, got to get a little bit more traffic. They're getting a lot of shots on Bobrovsky, but watch how many times it's an open look. You're not going to beat Bob very often from outside 30 feet if there's people when there's no traffic in front, right? Or even if you want to do like a dry where you get in his eyes as the release is coming. And that to me is where Edmonton's going to have to improve a little bit.
Must win.
I would tend to agree. Yes. Yeah. I know they won 3 in a row last year, so you could say theoretically, but it is hard. There's no question about it. And Florida comes in I don't know, momentum. No one saw game 3 coming in the fashion that it happened, because really from that you look at that goal, there was 3 major errors. I don't know what Stuart Skinner was doing. Draisaitl lost his man. Nurse ended up eventually losing his guy as well. There was 3 pretty big errors, and Edmonton's power play in the first period might have been the worst power play I've seen from them in a long time. They had 4 chances. Draisaitl, their main shooter, he didn't have a shot on the power play. He ended up not having a shot on goal the entire game. McDavid had 2 shots on 1 power play, and that was it. So the Oilers' man advantage, I think if Florida's going to stay aggressive, Edmonton's got to make them pay. But Edmonton's got to themselves. I think Florida has brought them down into the gutter where Florida loves it. They love it there. And as you said, Frank, they're great at that game. I think Edmonton, after every whistle, just line up and face off. Just keep the game, get out of the scrums, because it's not your style of play.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. By the time we talk again on Monday, the cup could have been handed out.
It's possible. There is a chance. Both of us think it's probably unlikely, but we shall see. Frank, have yourself a great weekend. And yes, we'll be talking either setting up game 6 or a back-to-back Stanley Cup for the Florida Panthers, which would be impressive if they can pull it off. That's the rundown, brought to you by Bet365. Enjoy the games.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.